Welcome back to Unholy Tales, where we bring your darkest nightmares to life. Tonight's story will make you think twice about staying late at school. Make sure you're somewhere safe, because we're about to begin. After hours at Blackwood Academy. The brass numbers on Principal Harrison's desk clock clicked over to 6 p.m. with a soft mechanical whir. Sarah Chen barely noticed the sound as she graded papers, red pen moving methodically across each page. After 15 years of teaching at Blackwood Academy, staying late had become routine, especially during finals week. The century-old building settled around her with familiar creaks and groans. Built in 1902, Blackwood Academy stood as a testament to Victorian architecture, all red brick and elaborate stonework, with halls lined in dark wood panelling that had absorbed decades of whispered conversations and hurried footsteps. Sarah appreciated the quiet that descended after the students left. No more squeaking sneakers on polished floors or lockers slamming shut. Just the gentle hum of the ancient radiators and the scratch of her pen across paper. A sharp crack echoed from somewhere down the hall, like a textbook hitting tile floor. She paused, pen hovering mid-stroke. The sound was out of place in the empty building. The janitor, Mr. Peterson, always started on the third floor and worked his way down. He wouldn't reach the second floor where her classroom was for at least another hour. "Hello," she called out, more annoyed than concerned. Sometimes students sneaked back in after hours, thinking they were clever. If someone's there, the building's closed. No response. Sarah returned to her grading, but found herself straining to listen. The radiator knocked, a regular rhythm she knew by heart. But underneath it, was that footsteps? The sound was odd, not the usual squeak of rubber soles, but a heavier click, like hard-soled shoes on wood. Click, click, click. It was moving closer. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, twice, then stabilized. Sarah's eyes darted to the wall clock, 6:13 p.m. The sun would be setting soon. The short days of December meant darkness came early. The footsteps stopped. Sarah realized she was holding her breath. She forced herself to exhale slowly, trying to laugh off her nervousness. She was being ridiculous. Old buildings made noise. That's all this was. Then she heard the humming. It was faint at first, barely audible. A melody she almost recognized but couldn't quite place. It seemed to be coming from the hall. The sound grew clearer. A child's voice, singing what might have been a nursery rhyme, but the words were wrong somehow. "Hello," Sarah called again, standing now. "This isn't funny." The humming stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, Sarah became aware of how dark it had gotten. The wan winter light filtering through the tall windows had taken on a bluish cast that made the shadows pool deeper in the corners of her classroom. She gathered her papers with trembling hands, shoving them into her messenger bag. Whatever was happening, she'd finish grading at home. As she reached for her coat, the temperature in the room plummeted. Her breath fogged in front of her face. The radiator gave one final clank and went silent. The door to her classroom, which she always left open while working late, slowly began to swing shut. Sarah lunged for it, but she was too late. It closed with a decisive click. She grabbed the handle and pulled. It wouldn't budge. "This isn't happening," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was, because now she could hear something breathing on the other side of the door. Heavy, wet breaths, like someone who had been running for a very long time. And then a voice, high and sweet and terribly young, spoke directly through the crack between door and frame. "Teacher, will you help me with my lesson?" Sarah stumbled backward, heart hammering against her ribs, because she recognized that voice. It belonged to Emily Watson, a student who had attended Blackwood Academy in 1956. who had died in this very classroom. The handle began to turn. Sarah pressed her back against her desk, mind racing. She knew Emily Watson's story. Every teacher at Blackwood did. The 10-year-old had been found dead in room 213 one winter evening in 1956, apparently from a fall that broke her neck. But there had always been whispers about what really happened, about why the girl had been in the school so late, about the teacher who resigned immediately after and disappeared. The same classroom Sarah now taught in. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Frost began creeping across the windows in delicate patterns, despite the fact that it was barely December. "I've been practicing my lessons," Emily's voice came again, closer now. "Will you check my work?" The lights flickered violently, then went out completely. In the darkness, Sarah heard the scratch of chalk on blackboard. When emergency lights sputtered to life with their sickly yellow glow, words were appearing on the board as if written by an invisible hand. "Be a good teacher. Stay after class. Help the children like he helped us." "He?" Sarah whispered. "Who's he?" A giggle echoed through the room, but it wasn't just Emily's voice now. Other children had joined in, their laughter building to a terrible chorus. Sarah's fingers found her phone. With trembling hands, she pulled up the school's website, navigating to the history page. There had to be something, some clue about what was happening. The archive photos loaded slowly. Class pictures through the decades scrolled past, 2010s, 2000s, 1990s. She went further back. 1980s, 1970s, 1960s. She stopped at 1956. Emily Watson's class photo. The girl was easy to spot, pale blonde hair, solemn expression. But what caught Sarah's attention was the teacher standing behind the class. Mr. Gerald Maxwell. Sarah's blood ran cold as more memories surfaced. Maxwell had been a history teacher, known for staying late to help struggling students. After Emily's death, he'd left abruptly. The official story was that he'd moved to Florida. But he hadn't been the last. Every decade or so, a teacher would leave suddenly. Students would vanish. The incidents were always explained away. Transfers, family moves, runaways. But as Sarah stared at Maxwell's face in the photo, a horrible suspicion began to form. The laughter grew louder. More chalk scratched against the board. He made us special. He made us eternal. Join us, teach forever. No, Sarah breathed. Maxwell didn't leave. He never left. He's still here. The temperature dropped again. Sarah's phone screen flickered and died. In the emergency lighting, she saw them materializing, transparent figures in outdated clothes. Children from every decade, their faces a mixture of sadness and terrible joy. And behind them, a tall figure in an old-fashioned suit emerged from the shadows. Gerald Maxwell looked exactly as he had in the 1956 photo, except his smile now held something hungry and inhuman. "Ah, Miss Chen," he said smoothly. "Staying late to help the children. Such a dedicated teacher. Just like me." Sarah's mind raced. She had to think, had to find a way out. The children, the ghosts, pressed closer, their hollow eyes fixed on her. Emily Watson stood at Maxwell's side, her neck bent at an impossible angle. "You see," Maxwell continued, "teaching is a noble profession, a chance to shape young minds. But why stop at just one generation? Why not teach forever?" The pieces clicked into place. The disappearances, the resigned teachers. Maxwell had been trapping souls here for decades, building his eternal classroom of the damned. Sarah's hand found the heavy brass bell on her desk, the old-fashioned kind they'd used before electric bells, the kind made of consecrated bronze, according to school legend. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "Now, Miss Chen." She swung the bell hard. its pure tone ringing out. The ghosts recoiled, their forms wavering. Maxwell's face contorted in rage. Sarah ran. The hallway was a gauntlet of reaching spectral hands and echoing screams. She struck the bell again and again, its sound cutting through the chaos. Behind her, Maxwell roared, a sound no human throat could make. She reached the main stairwell and looked down. Ghostly students lined every step, blocking her descent. But up, the bell tower, the massive bronze bell that had called students to class for over a century. Sarah ran upward, Maxwell's fury shaking the building around her. The ghost children wailed, their voices a deafening chorus of the damned. She burst into the bell tower as Maxwell materialized before her, his form now a twisted mockery of humanity. "You could have been special," he snarled. "Could have joined our little faculty meeting. Now you'll just be another tragic accident. They never look too closely at those." Sarah grabbed the bell's rope. "You forgot something, Maxwell. Want to know what makes a good teacher?" She pulled with all her strength. The great bell swung. "We protect our students." The bell's first toll hit like a physical wave. Maxwell screamed as its consecrated bronze voice rang out across the grounds. The ghost children's wails changed pitch, from threatening to relieved. With each toll, their forms grew brighter, more distinct. Maxwell lunged for Sarah, but another toll drove him back. "No, they're mine! My students, my classroom!" "Not anymore," Sarah gasped, pulling the rope again. "Class dismissed." The bell's voice reached fever pitch. Maxwell's form began to tear apart like smoke in a strong wind. The children's spirits brightened until they were almost blinding. Sarah saw Emily Watson smile, her neck straight, her face peaceful, before she and the others dissolved into pure light. Maxwell's final scream was cut short by the 13th toll. When the bell's voice finally faded, Sarah was alone in the tower. Later, after the police had responded to her frantic call, after she'd given a carefully edited version of events about hearing intruders and hiding in the bell tower, Sarah sat in her classroom as the morning sun rose. The blackboard was clean. Her phone worked perfectly. The radiator hummed its familiar tune. But in the corridor outside, she heard the faint echo of children laughing, not the haunting chorus of before, but the simple joy of souls finally set free. Sarah smiled and began preparing for another day of teaching. But she never stayed after sunset again. Some lessons, after all, only need to be learned once. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell, though perhaps not the consecrated bronze kind. Share your own after-school horror stories in the comments below. Until next time, pleasant nightmares.